First of all, I just wanted to thank you for joining me. Very nice of you to take some time out, and I know we're a bit limited for time, so I'll bear that in mind, okay?
Sure, I'm always happy to talk to my friends in Britain, no problem.
Welcome to Truth Sentinel, Dr. Boyle, and I understand that you're a professor of international law at the University of Illinois, is that right?
That is correct, and I also drafted the U.S. domestic implementing legislation for the Biological Weapons Convention, known as the Biological Weapons Anti-Terrorism Act of 1989, that was approved unanimously by both houses of Congress and signed into law by President George Bush Sr., and was also specifically designed to deal with the use of DNA genetic engineering for the production of biological weapons.
And I was reading about you earlier, and I don't think you're George Bush's biggest fan, is that right?
That is correct. I did set out with Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez and my friend Ramsey Clark to impeach Bush over Gulf War I, but I overlooked that, certainly. This is a matter of public health, as is this interview. So obviously this takes priority.
Yeah, and I basically contacted you because I heard you talking recently about some information you discovered on the NCBI National Center for Biotechnology Information, and I wanted to ask you, could you tell us something about that, how you came across it, and what does it tell us?
Sure. Well, I sent you the detailed interview I gave with this on Wednesday for 65 minutes, starting at 1 p.m. Chicago time. So that is the information I have available to me then. But just to, and you're free to circulate that transcript with the interview I'm giving you now. But just to briefly recap it, first, independent scientific experts have determined from a genetic analysis of the Wuhan coronavirus that it has gain-of-function properties, which is a telltale sign of a biowarfare agent that has been DNA genetically engineered. And that is either done in a BSL-4 facility or a BSL-3 facility, and that BSL-4 in Wuhan is there. It is even said it was set up to deal with the coronavirus. So it seems to me that this Wuhan coronavirus was a biological warfare agent that leaked out of that BSL-4 lab in Wuhan. Second, I also found, and you can find in the transcript of my interview, a scholarly article that indicates that two Chinese scientists worked with the University of North Carolina BSL-3 laboratory that already was involved in the SARS virus. SARS is a weaponized version of coronavirus to give it gain-of-function properties, which, as I said before, is only useful for offensive biological warfare purposes. It has no legitimate scientific or medical use at all. And it appears that these Nazi-type scientists at the University of North Carolina accepted money for from the Chinese government to permit these biowarfare experts to work on this project with them. And it's clearly listed that they were working for this Wuhan BSL-4 facility. So it appears that the Chinese government bought and paid for this gain-of-function SARS biowarfare agent and took it back to the Wuhan BSL-4 facility. Then I also discuss another scientific article where scientists from the Wuhan BSL-4 facility worked with scientists in Australia to do DNA genetic engineering to unite SARS with HIV. And it appears they likewise brought that back to the Wuhan BSL-4 facility. So as far as I can tell, what happened then at that BSL-4 facility was that they took these two types of biowarfare technology and tried to put them together to create a chimera. And indeed, that was confirmed by the study of those Indian scientists that did a genetic analysis and concluded it had HIV in there as well. So I'm afraid that is what we are dealing with here. Its lethality is somewhere between 15% to 18%. Its infectiousness is maybe 83%. People exposed to it get it. It can infect, say, somewhere between 3 to 7 people in the vicinity of someone who has it. People who have it are asymptomatic, namely they can spread it without them even knowing they are infected. It travels through the air. That's what gain of function property is all about. Maybe 6 to 7 feet from people who have it asymptomatically, and even from China, it travels with human feces that comes out of China and Hong Kong. Since feces are living organisms, it can travel maybe 6 to 7 feet from human feces as well. So we are dealing here with something that, at least in the public domain, we have never encountered before. Obviously, Porton down there in Britain, Fort Detrick here in the United States, Winnipeg up in Canada, have these types of biowarfare agents in their BSL-4 labs, I'm sure already. But now we have this escaped into the public. It's extremely dangerous, and I don't really know exactly what more to say beyond that.
I wanted to ask you about the NCBI National Center website, which I saw, and the article was on. That you're saying the first article they created this virus in the first place, but that's not the one that we're seeing in the public. You're saying that was sold to China, and then they modified it. Is that right?
Right. We have to understand that at the University of North Carolina lab, what was going on there, they were weaponizing SARS, which is already a biowarfare agent, to give it gain of function activities. And China basically paid to have someone involved in that and took that technology back to the Wuhan BSL-4 facility. Then what happened is there was another scientific article I discussed where someone at the Wuhan BSL-4 was doing work with scientists in Australia, and they took the SARS coronavirus and DNA genetically engineered it with HIV for AIDS. That's confirmed by the Indian study. So I believe what happened was they took these two technologies and tried to put them together to create a chimera of all three of these technologies put together. This happened with the swine flu. If you look at the swine flu, that too was a chimera of three different DNA genetically engineered biowarfare agents that were put together and clearly came out of a biowarfare laboratory. So it looks like that's what China was trying to do, and there was a leak. That there had been previous leaks of SARS at that BSL-4 at Wuhan, maybe 3 of them that have been reported. So I suspect this was a leak too, that someone working on this was infected, perhaps realized that he or she did not know they were infected because it's asymptomatic, went out and did their daily routine there around Wuhan for maybe 24 days. That seems to be the incubation period these days. And then came down with symptoms, and the Chinese government lied about it and covered it up ever since. And you just can't believe anything coming out of China.
And on that first website, the NCBI, where that report was, one of the contributors seemed to be working from Wuhan. That's right, and people can check that out for themselves, right, on that website.
That's correct. I mean, that's a smoking gun right there. That's where they got it for sure. But as I said, there's another article that should be related there that, excuse me, I'm getting a robocall here, so
yeah, no
I'm on someone's list. All right, I took care of it. And that too should be on the website there. So it seems to me they, and China paid for that too. So it's not a question of stealing the technology. It was simply that they were paying for it and brought it back home and put it all together. So it's even far more dangerous, I think, than what they were working on at UNC, although that was pretty dangerous to begin with. Indeed, I had condemned that lab before. They were doing gain-of-function work with MERS. That's Middle East Repertory System, which is already a weaponized version of SARS, and that lethality rate is about 33%. So thank heaven they did not take back MERS to Wuhan and weaponize it, at least as we know now. Maybe they did. I don't know. You'd have to check and see the published papers by that study, by that center on MERS, and if a Wuhan scientist was involved there.
And I guess they would say that they're creating these viruses so that they can study, maybe create vaccines. Is that correct?
No, that's a total lie. There is no legitimate scientific or medical purpose for gain-of-function properties, DNA genetic engineering. That's just a cover story. What happens is these Nazi biowarfare scientists go out all over the world to try to find every type of naturally existing poison, bacteria, virus. They bring them back to this BSL-3, BSL-4 labs. They then weaponize them. And then on the basis of the weaponized agents, they then say, well, now we're going to create a vaccine to protect against the weaponized agent we have already created. So that's what really is going on here. And this is really the two components of a biological weapon. The two components of a biological weapon is first an offensive agent, and then second, an alleged vaccine, because you cannot use the offensive agent unless you have a vaccine to protect your own people. So they just further incriminate themselves with that. But it's all in the UNC report. It's all there. You know, you don't need a PhD from MIT to figure out what they're doing there.
It certainly looks suspicious, but you know, when that India study came out that you mentioned, it was quickly withdrawn, and all the media said that this was just like it hadn't been checked or vetted by, hadn't been peer checked. What would you say to that?
I read that Indian study, and it made perfect sense to me, and it appears that political pressure was applied to those researchers to withdraw the study. As you know, Prime Minister Modi is trying to have good relations there with President Xi, so I suspect that's what happened. But I read that report, and it seemed very convincing to me.
And what do you think the outcome of this virus will be, and why has the reaction been so different compared to, say, like, I was looking at the figures for the common flu, and hundreds of thousands of people worldwide seem to have died, in at least a 6-month period. So why the big fuss over this one? Should we be panicking?
Well, I'm not saying anyone should panic. I think you need to inform yourself, but the lethality rate of the common flu is 0.1%. The lethality rate of the Wuhan coronavirus, as I said, is 15%, according to Lancet, 17% if you disaggregate figures produced by the Chinese government, and 18% in accordance with a British public health authority. And second, now, even as of today, the Chinese scientists have admitted it's as infectious as the common flu. So that is what we are dealing with here.
I was talking to my students, some of them who are in Wuhan, others in China, and they were saying that the government have told them they'll be going back to work in the next few weeks. I wondered, what do you think is going to happen in the coming months? Is this just going to disappear from the news? And we won't hear any more about it, or is this going to develop into something pretty bad?
Well, I'm afraid we are just seeing the beginning of a global pandemic here, and certainly I would encourage all your students to just stay here in the United States. That's all I can say.
You say that you think this might have been released accidentally, is that correct?
Yes, I believe it was an accident. There have been 2 to 3 releases before of SARS from that lab, and SARS is already a weaponized coronavirus. So right now, from what I can see, I believe this was an accident. Right, and you have to understand all these BSL-4, BSL-3 labs leak. You saw that, what was that, biowarfare lab there in Britain, Purebright. They leaked a biological warfare agent against animals, and it wiped out your cattle industry over there. So all these BSL-3, BSL-4s leak. Here in the United States, we have West Nile virus and Lyme disease. Those both leaked out of the U.S. biowarfare lab at Plum Island. So all these labs leak, every one of them. It's simply that, this is like playing, not just with dynamite, it's like playing with nitroglycerin. You have human beings who are fallible and make mistakes dealing with nitroglycerin-like substances, and all this high technology that is supposed to protect them, but it doesn't. So right now I'm going with a leak. I just don't believe the Chinese government did this deliberately.
What's been the response towards the information you've been releasing? Have any mainstream media outlets been interested to talk about this?
No. What happened here is that the first week of November 2001, I publicly blew the whistle that the Amerithrax attacks in October came out of a U.S. biological warfare weapons program and laboratory, and probably Fort Detrick. I was even on the BBC on that, and thereafter I have been completely blackballed and blacklisted off of all mainstream news media here in the United States, Canada, Europe, Britain, you name it. So that's just the way it is.
Yeah, the BBC aren't keen to kind of rock the boat, really. They tend to just follow the official story. I've also noticed in the UK that police have been given new powers to be able to detain people if they're suspected of having this virus. Do you think that could be one of the reasons that the panic's been created?
Yes, I think, well, I'm not trying to contribute to panic here. I suspect Prime Minister Johnson was briefed by his own biowarfare Nazi scientists there from Porton Down as to what's going on here. And so they are taking precautions, yes. I'm sure Porton Down, Detrick, Winnipeg, know exactly what's going on here. If I can figure it out from public sources, they can certainly figure it out and advise the governments accordingly. Sure.
And I know this is a big question, but is there anything we can do about this? What do you think is the next step for the public? Can we put any pressure on people to investigate the Wuhan lab, for example?
Well, right now my advice is that the public there in Britain has to get organized to protect yourselves, because all the governments are lying about this. They're all in cahoots. They all have their own Nazi biological warfare weapons labs, BSL-3, BSL-4, and they're not going to come clean. And so the British people are going to have to go out. You're going to have to inform yourself. You're going to have to get organized here to protect yourself. So there's no point investigating what happened there at Wuhan. Right now, we're in a stage of, in my opinion, containment and protection. And I think you need to speak with some of your top British public health experts about this matter, who have never taken a farthing to do this Nazi-type biological warfare weapons work. You need to scrutinize their background. I call these people death scientists. So that would be my advice. Go out and put together a committee of some of your top medical, microbiology, and public health experts to provide independent advice here.
This is definitely food for thought, and I want to again thank you for taking the time out, Dr. Boyle, to chat with us, and maybe I'll try contacting you again for an update.
That would be fine. And again, my best to all my friends in Britain. My wife is of British descent, and that means my children are half Irish American and half British American. So I wish all the best to the British people.
Thanks, Dr. Boyle. I appreciate that, and thank you again, and hope to speak to you again sometime.
Sure, and send me a link of whatever you put out. Thank you.
Yeah, will do. Thanks, Dr. Boyle. Catch you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.